one of the things with flow state is that engagement is the whole point. It's this right level of engagement, and that engagement is inherently positive.
Yeah.
That being engaged is a feel-good thing, and that we can only achieve an optimal state, a flow state, through that depth of engagement. Welcome to The Intimate Philosopher, where philosophy meets intimacy and life's biggest questions finally feel at home. I'm Dr. Emma Smith. I'm a licensed professional counselor, certified sex therapist, and existential philosophy nerd, inviting you to join me for an after-hours conversation. This is a space to slow down, pour a glass of wine, or maybe a cup of tea, and explore the messy, beautiful intersections of meaning, connection, desire, and being fully human. This is the place for real conversations about the parts of life that don't fit neatly into a box. So, grab your glass, get comfy, and let's dive in. Hi, friends, and welcome back to The Intimate Philosopher. I'm your host, Dr. Emma Smith, and I am joined once again by Dr. Alivia. So glad to have you here with me again.
So glad to be here.
Eventually, I'm just going to stop pretending like this is not going to be a regular thing, and we'll just say that we're back. But for right now, I enjoy introducing you every single time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
So we're going to go with it. Today, we're diving back into all things flow state, and I think there's probably at least 2 more episodes about this. This is just such a rich and some people would say dense. I'm going to say rich topic, and I just love it. So, for those of you joining us and listening, I think that sometimes people listen to podcasts and they think, oh, this is very scripted, or, you know, I don't know. I don't know what people think. I sometimes wonder if this is how people actually talk. And for us, specifically on this topic, I have to admit that this is probably our best recreation of what it sounds like in our home on a random morning when we're both, having our first cup of coffee and saying, I was thinking about this. And then it just kind of dives in. So this is actually how we talk to one another, even without the microphones.
It's true. This is definitely how our conversations go.
Absolutely. So, okay. So today we're talking about flow state. And Liv, you were kind of the one who kept us organized on this when we were trying to figure out how do I not spin off into a rabbit trail. So why don't I just let you take it from here?
Okay. Well, last time we really talked about time and how that kind of related to flow state. Although I think really we talked more about time last time. And this time we are going to dive more into flow state itself. That said, we are also there's a couple notes, I think. One is that um, the research on flow state has predominantly been done in individual athletes, and maybe more recently there's some studies about people playing music together and how flow state can affect groups and thinking. But we are really going to take the ideas from flow state and flow state research and flow state writing and kind of apply them to relationships. And I think it's important to say that this is really our perspectives. This is us talking about, we went to this TEDx talk about flow state, and I think I have done some reading individually on flow state, and so have you. And there's some of that in the popular, zeitgeist in the culture, but neither one of us are neuroscientists. And that's probably important to say. And to say that as we talk about this, we are not saying this is some kind of capital T truth about neuroscience or flow state or relationships. It's really about us talking about perspectives that we have and maybe giving you ideas or ways to think about things, right? Like, this
Mhm.
is how I used to talk to when I was teaching my young medics about orthopedic injury evaluation is, I used to tell them, I don't the thing that I care about the most is that you leave today's class a better thinker. Like, you don't have to be able to say anything that I told you because there are a million people who can tell you the specific things that I told you. I want you to be better at thinking about the problem, about thinking about injuries. And so I think that's really what we're getting after here is not here's some kind of capital truth, lecture on neuroscience and flow state, but rather, hey, we had this interesting experience. We went to this thing. We heard these people who were very smart talk about neuroscience and flow state. And because of the work we do with people and injuries and relationships and all of that, it naturally kind of collided for us. And so maybe all of this gives you, the listener, a new window into this, into your
Mhm.
relationships, into your body, into your life.
Yeah.
I think,
Yeah. I mean, yes, and, when I think about when I was setting up this podcast, right? It's called The Intimate Philosopher, not the philosophizing psychologist, right? Or the philosophizing psychology podcast. It is about the questions, and it's not even in the mental health and psychology category, right? It's in the society and culture category because, yes, we talk about relationships and yes, we bring in concepts, but it really is about how are you going to think about these things and how are you going to synthesize this information or these concepts into what you're building as your life. And that is so important to me.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've obviously talked about that a lot. But the questions, we love the questions. We love learning. We love the questions. We love the discussions that come from the questions.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
yeah.
absolutely. And I think one of the things that's so fascinating about neuroscience is that it's it's like, philosophy, physics, and neuroscience are these three categories of study where people so often go, "We don't know yet."
Yeah. And
Right?
things we thought we knew are now no longer the case or have been expanded or have been redirected. We're constantly reevaluating and reassessing what we thought we knew.
Yeah. It's so interesting to me that that's how those three different disciplines have this inherent humility in them because it really is at the edge of what we are able to grasp at any given moment. And I love that. And so I think it's just this perfect marriage. So I'm really excited to talk about this because, I have a lot of high achievers that come in, my type A plus plusers, I love you so much. And people talk about optimization, and one of the things with flow state is it is kind of this optimized state of something. And it's this optimized state of balance, actually, between skill, like our skill level, um, and between skill level and challenge, right? And so if you extend yourself too much into a state where what you're being asked to do is so far beyond your skill level, then you can flip over into a state of anxiety. And if you are asked to do something that is too easy for you and doesn't challenge you or engage you enough, you'll slip into boredom. But there's this state of flow where you are asked to be pushed and meet your limit, but not go over it. And that when we get there, it's this place of awareness and presence and engagement that it's this sweet spot of engagement, I think.
Yeah, I think, it's interesting what pops up for me in this moment that isn't part of what we talked about earlier is that Certainly in the culture I grew up in the army and in sports, I think that often there's this idea that um, I think that we get pushed to our limit when people say they're pushing us to our limit or whatever. I think often that is actually past the point where we are capable of inhabiting flow state. There's this, I think of y- you can't be you can't be beyond the edge, right?
Mhm.
Because otherwise it's actually too challenging because you're having to think about it. That's one of the kind of defining characteristics of this is that your kind of awareness of yourself fades away. And if it's too hard, like um, you can be beyond that and it's no longer flow. But I think there's this idea that you can be pushed, like pushing it to the edge is actually really valuable. And there can be good things about that, but that is actually not where flow lives. It doesn't live beyond the edge.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I love that. You know, for me, I naturally go to relationships, right? Everything comes back to relationships and sex. Um, but and we'll get there because it's so interesting to me. I've been thinking a lot. I've teased this masterclass that's coming up and talking about relationships and long-term relationships and how you keep that passion alive in long-term relationships. And I've been thinking a lot about the stories that we are told by the culture and by society about what is a good relationship. And what I've come to realize is that I think we get told this fairy tale about a happily ever after,
Mm.
and that a happily ever after is defined as something that shouldn't require any work or effort, and it has this fixed state of arrival. Like you arrive at your happily ever after, not that you are living, breathing, and co-creating your happily ever after. They ride off into the sunset and we never ask to where.
Yeah, that's always where the story ends is the happily ever after. You ride off into the sunset and it's just expected. The implication is and everything is perfect from there on out.
Right. Right. And of course, our adult selves, when we actually stop and talk about it, we say, "Oh, well, of course we know that that's not how it exists." And I kind of go, "Well, do you?"
Right, right. I think we have this idea actually subconsciously or maybe even consciously that it should be like that, that we're that it should be that good all the time and that if it's not, that we've somehow failed.
Mhm. Mhm. And conversely, in our one-on-one conversations, when I think about, I think back to DC and like brunch was a really big deal in DC, right? There's like a whole brunch culture. And wherever you are listening from, between the two of us, we've lived in lots of different cities, in lots of different countries, even. And I don't think that you can fully understand the brunch culture in DC unless you have been there. And there's this idea that in our one-on-one conversations, right, people say things that seem counter to it. They say, "Well, relationships are really hard."
So hard.
Right? And like, yeah, they are. Um, the relationships are hard. They're challenging for sure. Living your life with a whole other autonomous, independent human being is actually difficult. But there's this idea, even when we say, like, but relationships are just hard. You just got to stick it out. There again, this like, stick it out to what end?
Well, it's like you were saying earlier, this idea of this happily ever after, this fairy tale, it's almost like we expect that that's where it should be. And if you aren't there, then you've failed. And so you have to do all of this really, really hard work to get back to there or to get there in the first place. But But I think there's this idea of you will arrive at this state of bliss or nirvana or euphoria or whatever, and that, like, that's the end.
Mhm.
Like, there's no we arrive there and then it's good. That's where the story always ends.
Right, and that's not how that works. Because what happens well, so let's play with that, right? What happens if you find a relationship that you can arrive at a fixed point and say, "Whew, I'm done. I'm done. We have arrived. Here we are." Right? What happens is you inherently stop engaging.
Yeah.
And I think that, you know, I hadn't thought about this before, but when I'm thinking about like the rise of the trad wife influencers, and I'm talking about fairy tales and like movies, but we get a lot of our fairy tales from social media these days. The worst part about it is that, it's one thing to watch a movie and see a cartoon and have it go happily ever after. It's a whole other thing when you are scrolling TikTok or Instagram or whatever new thing that I am now a geriatric millennial and don't know what they're using today, that it is a whole other thing when these people seem to look like you and seem to have a life that should be accessible to you. And it's not, because guess what? Behind the scenes, it's not even accessible to them. And
It's
we're
not
starting to
real.
see that. No, it's
Yeah.
not real. It's fantasy. It is fantasy. It is airbrushed. And now it's even AI generated.
It's true. I wanna go back to this thing you said about when you feel like you've arrived, you stop engaging, and what the image that shows up for me is this. I mean, we've all seen this at the end. I'm sure we've seen this at the end of some kind of clip, either on social media or in, legacy media, where somebody in a race thinks they have won. They think they have arrived and they stop trying. They're like,
Mm.
I can coast into the finish. And somebody else, the person who was previously in second place, they realize, oh, if I push myself, I might be able to win in the last, 5 seconds, the last 3 seconds. And that continued engagement changes the outcome of this thing. I think that that is what we're talking about here. If you stop engaging, it is not a neutral thing to stop engaging, right? Like that, we have this idea that we have arrived and the outcome is fixed and it will be good, but that's not actually the way it works.
Mhm.
And we teased this a little bit in the last episode, but I kind of want to flip this whole thing on its head and say, what if the engagement is actually the whole thing?
Let me pause the episode for a second because I want to ask you something. When is the last time that your partner looked at you like the person they married and not the co manager of your household? If you're running your life together flawlessly, the schedules, finances, the kids, all of it, but somewhere along the way you became project partners instead of lovers, I have a name for that. I call it roommate mode. And it's not a sign that anything is wrong with you or your relationship, but it is a sign that the exact skills that make you excellent at everything else are working against you in this one area. I'm teaching how to break it live and one night only with a couple of friends on August 14th. The spots are limited and I'm not recording this one. So if you want in, DM me the word reclaim or click the link in the show notes and I'll get you all set up before it fills.
What if there's not any arrival ever at all? Because the engagement or the work or the effort or the journey is actually where all of the goodness is found, right? Like, and if we go back to this running analogy, right? How many people run one half marathon and are like, that's it, I arrived, I did my thing.
Not I.
Right, right. Like most people are like, I gotta do it again. But it's not because you're like you're not counting the number of races that you've won or the places that you've arrived. It's the journey. It's the training and the like doing this thing that changes who you are, that is the actual joy and goodness of it all. Like,
Mhm.
the medal isn't where the goodness is. That's not what matters. It's the training, it's the race itself.
Yeah. Yeah. In this moment, you had me watch a movie recently
I
that I
did.
never that I never would have watched on my own, and I'm so glad that we watched it. It was, Ford versus Ferrari, and you had me at Christian Bale because he's one of my favorite he's one of my favorite actors since he played Laurie in Little Women, but with Winona Ryder. And to he has this moment, he plays this really interesting race car driver character, and he has this moment where he he actually well, wins, but because of a technicality loses this race. And he has this moment where Matt Damon's character says, I'm sorry. And he says, you promised me the race, not the win. And
Yeah.
that just made me think of that when you're talking about this engagement. So look at me making a car movie reference. There you go. That needs to go up on my wall somewhere because that's not gonna happen again,
I think the
probably.
kids would say, "We love to see it."
There we go. Thank you. Well, I have been seen. So, here we are, this idea of it was the race. You promised me the race, not the win.
Yeah, I love that so much in this context. The idea of, you promised me the race. And it's funny. I also wasn't going to go here. I hadn't thought of this, but it makes me think of wedding vows, like your
Yeah.
classic wedding vows. Um, actually give the lie to the fairy tale, right? Like
Oh,
your classic wedding vows actually do outline all of the terrible things that are going to happen in the course of a relationship or that could happen in
yeah.
sickness and in health, for richer or for poorer. And I think we like skip over what that means in totality. There's this like, ah, yeah, like I'm going to stay with you even if we are poorer or even if one of us gets sick. But it's like a formality. And it's um there's this discreetness about it that doesn't quite tell the story.
Hmm.
Whereas I think like you promised me the race. Like the race is the whole thing. Like I don't know where we're getting to, but I'm here for the whole journey.
Oh, that's
There's
so
something about this where breaking it down into its discrete parts actually doesn't capture the big picture. Like you need the this is what it means.
mm, yeah. Oh, that's so fascinating, and, I could go in a whole different direction with this, and if anybody has some wedding vows that they, because people will write them themselves, that don't do that, that actually manage to say, "I'm gonna be on this journey with you," I would love to see them if you would be willing to share them with me, so please send them to us. Our links are in the show notes. Um, it's really interesting because to bring this back to flow state, one of the things with flow state is that engagement is the whole point. It's this right level of engagement, and that engagement is inherently positive.
Yeah.
That being engaged is a feel good thing, and that we can only achieve an optimal state, a flow state, through that depth of engagement. And I usually call it presence, right? Because in the philosophy world, we don't call it engagement, we call it presence. But it's not a passive presence, it's an active presence. It is an engaged presence. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah, I mean, I think when we talk about being present with someone, there is this sense of like I'm leaning back in my chair right now, like this is not being I'm just like here. There's a
Mhm.
difference between being, like, physically in the same place as someone and being present, being engaged, being active. We talk about, like, hearing something versus actively listening. There's this engagement in the thing, in this relationship, and I think that is presence, and you talk about that so much, both on the podcast and to your clients, and we talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah, and trying to, stay in that moment and be with, right? Like, I think that with is an underutilized preposition, right? Yeah. Yes, preposition. It's an underutilized state too, right, of being with.
Yeah. And I mean, it requires a lot of, to bring it back to your existential philosophy, it requires being in the here and now. I think we
Mhm.
do so much, like, thinking about the past or planning for the future, but presence and engagement requires being here now. You can't be present in the future or present in the past. Like, you can't be engaged there. The only place you can be engaged is right now.
Mhm. Yeah. It's so true. It's so true. And when you think about that in the context of relationships, you know, eh, one of the things that's so interesting is to think about it in terms of attachment styles,
Yeah.
right? And if you think about, oh gosh, we were talking about this earlier, that in attachment styles, we talk about avoidant attachment, which is very leaned out,
Mhm.
and we talk about anxious attachment, which has this kind of, it's a leaning in, but it's more extreme. It's past engagement. It is to the point of feeling like your safety is being threatened with distance, right? And
Yeah.
that's how, when we talk about avoidant attachment styles and anxious attachment styles often being drawn to each other, there becomes this push-pull dance, and that is a form of engagement, but it's not the form of engagement that would ever let a couple enter a flow state because of what you had said earlier, which is that a flow state requires a sense of stability and safety that will allow for a different set of, of neurons to come online, really, when it comes to it. Like, you need to be able to forget about monitoring your environment for safety and to let things become faded into the background so that you can really focus and engage with what you're doing. And a secure attachment, I can't be I can't be fighting for the future of my relationship and think that I'm going to be able to engage with you in this flow state kind of way, this optimal kind of way, because survival is always going to win over, like, keeping you alive, keeping a relationship alive is always going to dominate the ability to be in this. I think, I don't know if they said this or not, but did they talk about flow as an inherently creative state? I don't remember if
Yes.
they
Yeah,
they
I
did.
think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. I'm not making that up. Good for me.
I don't think so.
Okay. We can't create and be creative and playful if we're in a threat state.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this idea of a secure attachment allows, or the conditions that like, a secure attachment creates the conditions that would allow you to experience a flow kind of relationship with someone. And that secure attachment requires engagement. It is not a passive state. You don't arrive at a secure attachment, right? I think that historically we've talked about, well, you're either an anxious attacher, or or you're a secure attacher, or you're an avoidant attacher. And we don't think that that's really the case anymore, that those things are more fluid and dependent on environment and what's happening. And what that means is that you can create a secure attachment.
Mhm.
And that secure attachment gives you the conditions to have these flow moments or periods of time. And when we say that, I'm not necessarily saying that it is the same literal neural network that is activating when you have a healthy, like secure relationship with your partner, but that they're analogous,
Mhm.
that there's this sense of, I mean, I think of it as a Mobius strip actually, where you have
Oh,
this,
wait, time out. A what?
a Mobius strip.
Oh,
Um,
yes,
it's a,
that very common thing that I'm sure all of us already know about except me. So can you please explain for me what a Mobius strip is?
it's hard to explain it without a picture. Um, well, here, hold on. So a Mobius strip is,
She's getting out the pen and paper, folks.
no, I'm
She
just getting
forgot
out
that
of,
this is a podcast.
it's a piece of paper, but I'm gonna have to show you because it's like that's how this works. So
Okay, well, we will also put the link to the picture in the show notes.
it's where you have this piece of paper is too small, but you have a loop, but it's a flat loop. It's a flat thing, but there's a twist in it when it hooks around. And so you can go all the way around it and you are on both sides of it. There's never an end to the flat loop.
Oh, okay. So, like when my necklace is twisted.
Yes, I think. You can get on both sides of this flat thing without ever crossing over the edge.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. And if you try to flip it over to straighten it out, it just
yeah.
flips the entire thing over. Yeah. That is actually like when you have one of those, for anybody who can't see this, everybody has had like a flat, herringbone chain necklace, and you have accidentally put a twist in
Yes.
it.
Correct.
There you go.
That is the Mobius strip. And so it's this co-creating, self-creating closed system where this engagement causes like consistent engagement can build and doesn't have to, right? Like you can be engaged with somebody and not build a secure attachment, right? Like you could be engaged in a very leaned out way, or you could be over engaged in this very, anxious kind of way. But a like healthy, secure, like easy-ish, not easy necessarily, but this kind of flow kind of engagement, right? If we're engaged in the things that are good about our relationship, we create together a secure attachment, which then like continues to loop on itself
Hmm.
and gives you the conditions to enter into this more flow state of our relationship.
Mm. I love that. I love that. And thank you for allowing me to be silly and make a reference to necklaces and everything else.
No, it's perfect. I think that that's a great analogy. Like that's a great picture of that.
Yeah, that's so cool. Well, and I think, this idea of engagement and secure attachment, there's some people that this doesn't happen as much anymore now that I'm a sex therapist, but it used to happen a lot more when I was working with couples before, and they would wait so long to come in. And one person would be desperate to try to bring their partner back into this like sense of engagement. And the other partner was like, I'm just marking time until I can get out,
Yeah.
you know? And it was really hard to work with them back then. Now I would say it would be almost impossible to work with them on anything related to the space between them as far as a relationship until you got that other person re-engaged,
Yeah.
right? And I would probably be a lot more direct on that, saying like, "Hey, listen, I believe that I am good at what I do, but you are asking me to pull a rabbit out of a hat right now."
Yeah. Yeah. One person can't fix a relationship. It requires the conditions actually require both people to be actively engaged to have a healthy, good relationship.
Mhm.
Or maybe to have it be that fairy tale relationship. Like, sure, you can exist in parallel with someone without engaging. But if you want that fairy tale, if you want the race, like the race isn't passive.
Yeah.
It's not parallel. It is engaged and present and active.
Yeah. Well, and even like let's say that you are somebody who's like, "No, I want the fairy tale relationship." Right? I used to have in my signature block in my email, my personal email, I used to have it was a Calvin and Hobbes quote from back in like the comic strip days and it said, "Happiness isn't good enough for me. I demand euphoria."
Yes.
Right? Yeah,
Yes.
cuz that's how I roll. And one of the things, and I think when I had that in my signature block, I actually was thinking about it as like euphoria as a fixed state because I was in my 20s and
Right.
that's what your 20s are for. You're
Well, you
you're
don't know any better.
you don't. And now I'm like, "Okay," and people used to say, "That's not real. That's not real." And it is real, and it doesn't exist in the way that I thought it did back then.
Yeah.
You can have the fairy tale relationship. You just have to keep recreating it every day
You
and
do.
moment by moment and
Yeah.
challenge by challenge, right? And not every day is going to give you the possibility of having that end result. But that doesn't mean that if you're one of those people who's like, no, I have to have this. I don't want to be somebody who's jaded. Fine, don't. But also realize that the conditions are not at a fixed point. It is through an iterative
Yeah.
process. And also you have to have the someone, the other person be in that journey with you.
Yeah.
You can do a lot on your own, actually, in a relationship, but that isn't going to be the thing that you can get at.
Yeah.
You can move the needle a little bit, but eventually the other person has to want to engage in that too, you know? So, yeah, flow state in relationships. I love this.
That's really good.
It is. It is. Can we talk about sex before we end? Because I need to make this about sex.
I do know you need to make this about sex. You need to make everything about sex.
I do. You know why? Because people tell me they write in and they say, "You haven't actually been talking that much about sex," when I
Did
don't.
somebody write in and say you haven't been talking about sex? Is that real?
That is actually real.
Oh my God. I love that. Okay. Well, sex it is. Let's sex it up.
Let's sex it up. All right. So, when I was thinking about this is very much in the context of what's going on in real life because I don't remember if I mentioned this or not, but I am now in possession of a truly obnoxious amount of sex toys.
So many sex toys have come to the
So
house.
many sex toys have come to the house. I am so glad that discreet packaging is a thing because I am involved in uh, being a judge for these this sex toy symposium. And so people are sending their products and in some cases people are sending their entire line of products and they are, it's about like the packaging and the quality of the materials and like do the things work and all of this kind of stuff. And it's been really interesting to me to think about engagement. And I think that one of the things that the industry is trying to do, and that I think as sex therapists, we're trying to do, is make sex more accessible. And while that's a really good thing, I think that there's also this, trying to appeal to like whimsy and novelty and play and trying to toe this like fine line between when does a toy or a accoutrement, right, take over to the point where the person that you were having this experience with fades to the background and then this tool comes to the foreground too much, and, like, what is the balance in that, you know? And so, like, for example, like, they are shaped in so many different ways, and some of them are shaped in the typical ways that you would expect, and some of them are shaped in wildly different ways that you would not expect. Some even, like, as a throwback to maybe your childhood toys, which I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about that just yet. So, when you think about that, you go, "Well, like, how much of my focus is going to be on my partner? How much of my focus is going to be on me? And how much of my focus is being externalized to this thing, this object that's in there?" And I'm this is like a half-baked thought right now, but the next time that you're using a toy, I'm just curious, to what extent does it help you be present in the moment? And to what extent does it help you be less present in the moment because you're focused on creating an experience or trying out something new versus actually being in your body and present with, like, the feelings that are going on?
That's really fascinating. I think, uh, I go somewhere different with it. Uh,
Oh, tell me.
well, I think that, um I mean, what shows up for me is this idea of, you said making sex more accessible. Like that is what a lot of the manufacturers are trying to do of sex toys. That there's
I think
this,
so.
um, and like I could have a whole conversation about this now because it's nuanced um, and I'm hesitant to say anything actually because I think it is so nuanced. I think there is some goodness in that, and I think like good sex requires presence.
Yeah.
Like, there is some amount of I mean, read you this quote from this book, um, the other day. Remember when sex was safe and motorcycles were dangerous?
Mhm.
And we've made motorcycles so safe that now they have backup cameras, and we can argue about motorcycles needing backup cameras or whether backup cameras make them safer, but there's this idea of one of the things about it, motorcycling, sex, is that it requires engagement. Like that is why it is so good. And if you take the engagement requirement out of the thing,
Mhm.
does it continue to be as good? Right? Like, isn't the engagement a required ingredient for it to
Mm.
be as good as it can be? I don't know. Like, I have this like, don't make it easier. Don't like there from an accessibility standpoint, right? Like I understand that there are things that we need to do to make sure that everyone can participate. And that's not what I'm saying here. I'm not saying don't make it more accessible in that way, but I mean that you can't take the engagement out of a relationship and have a good relationship or have an enjoyable or like passionate relationship. Maybe it's fine, but
Mhm.
it's not, like, passionate and I don't know, alive?
Yeah.
And I think
Yeah.
of the same like, that is where I go with this is, and not that sex toys do this or don't do this, but I just my thought about this is not that sex is supposed to be work, but it does require engagement for it to be, like, good.
It does, and I think there is a difference between, making something accessible, right, and being an invitation to step into vulnerability,
Yes.
and then making it a step further beyond that to maybe novelty
Yeah.
and something that is a little bit more, I don't know, that it just gets a little bit more. I don't have a better phrase
Yeah.
for that, where it pulls you into, I am using this thing, and the thing becomes the central focus, almost like in photography, where, like, things are, like, softly
Yeah.
blurred, and then there's something that becomes more hyper focused, and it's like, where is the focus?
Yeah.
and pulling that out. I don't that it's such an interesting it's just such an interesting thing, and what's really even more interesting about it, and I'm so glad that I got to have the experience of going to the symposium last year, is that you get to talk with the people who have created these objects or these toys or these loops and all these different things, and you get to actually when I talk to them, a lot of times they wanna tell me about how the thing works, and I wanna hear what they're trying to do with that thing. What is the story
Yeah.
behind that? Right? Even because the way that I receive something in a box is might be very different than the story of how the person came up with it, right?
Yeah.
And so what I'm thinking of this moment is that this year I may be like, "Hey, do you wanna come on the podcast?"
Yeah. Yeah. Tell us about what you were thinking when you made this.
Yeah. Yeah. Right? And I think that that's so interesting because that can get lost into, like, to what extent is does that will that change it,
Yeah.
right? Will that change how I receive this thing? So anyway, so thank you for letting me go there and make it about sex.
I
So,
love that.
and for the person who sent me that email, you know who you are. And so here we are. I'm responsive.
Send us emails. DM
And
us.
yes, this is also a thing to say. Send us emails, and you can absolutely reach out to the show through at the Intimate Philosopher podcast or Emma Smith PhD, or if you have a physical therapy and sports related question, you can slide into Dr. Olivia's DMs at
Olivia Stellick, PT.
there you go. And we will link all of those below as well. Okay. I think this is probably a good place to pause, and we're going to come back. And in the next episode, I think we're actually going to talk about flow state in terms of performance. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I think so.
Okay. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much for spending the time with me today, Dr. Olivia, and to our amazing listeners. And we will see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much for joining me for this after hours conversation. If something in today's episode made you pause, get curious, or see yourself a little more clearly, share it with a friend and keep that conversation going. Until next time, keep exploring that messy, beautiful space between meaning and being human. I'll see you next time.